Every night at exactly 3:17 a.m., someone knocked on my front door. 3 slow knocks. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just deliberate. Knock. 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 The first night, I assumed it was a mistake. The second night, I checked the peephole. Nobody was there. By the fifth night, I installed a security camera. At 3:17 a.m., the knocking happened again. And the camera showed an empty porch. No person. No car. No movement. Just 3 knocks coming from the door of a house that had been empty for almost 20 years. My name is Rachel, and this is the story of the old house my mother warned me never to move into, the knocking that happened at the same time every night, and the family secret that was hidden behind a locked bedroom door. Welcome back to Calm Verdict Stories. If you enjoy stories about family secrets, hidden truth, mystery, karma, and emotional discoveries, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because today's story is for anyone who has ever felt that something from the past was trying to get their attention. I inherited the house from my grandmother. It was a small one-story home on the edge of town, built in the 1960s. White siding. Blue shutters. A narrow front porch. A large maple tree in the yard that leaned slightly toward the roof. My grandmother had lived there alone for most of my life. When I was a child, I loved visiting her. She had a vegetable garden, a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon, and a big old television that only seemed to show game shows and weather reports. But there was one room in the house I was never allowed to enter. The room at the end of the hallway. Grandma called it your Aunt Claire's room. The door was always locked. Even after Aunt Claire died. I knew almost nothing about her. My mother never talked about her. My grandmother barely talked about her. All I knew was that she had been my mother's older sister, that she died when she was 17, and that my mother refused to come inside the house after the funeral. When Grandma passed away, my mother told me I should sell the house immediately. Don't move in, she said. I was confused. Why not? She looked away. Some places hold too much pain. At the time, I thought she was grieving. I had recently gone through a divorce. My apartment lease was ending. The house was paid off, close to my job, and needed only minor repairs. So I moved in. The first few weeks were quiet. Too quiet, maybe. The house had the kind of silence that made every small sound feel bigger. The refrigerator clicking on. The old pipe settling. Branches scraping the windows when the wind picked up. But nothing felt dangerous. I painted the living room. I replaced the curtains. I cleaned out Grandma's cabinets. I planted flowers along the porch. I even started to feel happy there. Then the knocking began. The first night, it was exactly 3:17 a.m. I woke up because I thought I heard something in a dream. 3 knocks. I looked at my phone. 3:17. I got out of bed, walked to the front door, and looked through the peephole. The porch was empty. I opened the door anyway. The street was still. No cars. No footsteps. No one. I locked the door and went back to bed. The second night, it happened again. 3 knocks. 3:17 a.m. This time, I didn't open the door. I looked through the window. Nothing. By the fourth night, I started wondering whether someone was playing a prank. I mentioned it to my neighbor, Mr. Thomas. He had lived across the street from Grandma for more than 30 years. When I told him about the knocks, his expression changed. Every night, he asked. Yes. At the same time? Yes. He looked toward my house. Then he said, maybe you should call your mother. I laughed nervously. What does that mean? But he shook his head. Just call her. I called my mother that evening. She didn't answer. I sent a message asking her to call me when she could. She replied 2 hours later. Is something wrong with the house? That was strange. Not, how are you? Not, what happened? Just that. I told her about the knocking. For a long time, she didn't reply. Then she sent one message, do not open the locked bedroom door. I stared at the screen. I typed back, why? She didn't answer. The next morning, I walked down the hallway toward Aunt Claire's room. The door was still there. White paint yellowed with age. Small brass knob. Old keyhole below it. I had passed it dozens of times since moving in. But after my mother's message, it felt different. It felt like the entire house was pointing toward it. I tried the knob. Locked. I checked the drawers in Grandma's old desk. Nothing. I checked the kitchen cabinets, the hallway closet, the garage. No key. Then I found a small envelope tucked beneath a loose floorboard in Grandma's bedroom closet. It had my name on it. Inside was a note. Rachel, if you are reading this, the knocking has started again. I am sorry I did not tell you sooner. The key is in the blue tin under the garden bench. Please do not be afraid. Claire only wants the truth to be known. I read that sentence over and over. Claire only wants the truth to be known. I didn't sleep that night. At 3:17 a.m., the knocking came again. Knock. 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 This time, I sat in the hallway instead of my bedroom. I watched the locked door at the end of the hall. The knocking sounded like it came from the front door. But something else happened. After the third knock, the old bedroom door clicked. Not opened. Just clicked. Like someone had turned the knob from the other side. I ran outside before sunrise and found the blue tin under the garden bench. Inside was an old brass key. When I held it in my hand, I felt sick. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Part of me wanted to call my mother and demand answers. But another part of me knew I had spent my entire childhood watching adults avoid the truth because it was inconvenient. I didn't want to become one of them. That afternoon, I unlocked Aunt Claire's door. The room was frozen in time. A floral bedspread. A bookshelf filled with teenage novels. A vanity table with a cracked mirror. A calendar still hanging on the wall from 2004. And on the desk, covered by a sheet of dust, was an old cassette recorder. Beside it sat a stack of journals tied with a ribbon. The top journal had Claire's name written inside. I opened it carefully. The first pages were normal. School notes. Friends' names. Song lyrics. Complaints about homework. But a few months before her death, the tone changed. Claire wrote about my mother. She said Mom had been dating a boy named Kyle. Mom was 16. Kyle was 19. My grandmother hated him. Claire wrote that Kyle was controlling. He checked Mom's phone, waited outside school, and got angry when she talked to anyone else. Then one entry stopped me cold. Mom wants to break up with Kyle. She told him tonight. He said if she leaves him, he'll make everyone sorry. The next entry was dated 3 days later. Claire says Kyle came to the house while Grandma was at work. He wanted Mom to talk to him. Mom locked herself in the bathroom. Claire told him to leave. He got angry. I kept reading. Claire wrote that she had started recording things because she was scared. She wrote that she had hidden a cassette tape inside the desk. The tape was supposed to prove that Kyle had threatened Mom. But the last journal entry was different. It was written in uneven handwriting. Kyle came back. Mom is at school. I told him she doesn't live here anymore. He said he knows I'm lying. I'm scared. I heard Grandma's car pull in. I'm going to hide the tape. That was the final entry. Claire died that night. The official story was that she had fallen down the basement stairs. My mother had been at a school event. Grandma found Claire at the bottom of the steps when she came home. The police said it was an accident. Everyone accepted it. But Claire's journal made it clear that Kyle had been there. I found the cassette tape hidden inside a false panel beneath the desk drawer. I stared at it for a long time before playing it. The sound was rough. Static. A door closing. Then a young man's voice. Kyle. I had never met him, but I had seen a photograph once in an old family album. He was telling someone to open the bathroom door. My mother's voice was crying. Claire's voice told him to leave. Kyle said, "You think you can ruin my life and just walk away?" Then there was a loud sound. A crash. Claire yelling. The recording stopped. I sat on the floor of that locked bedroom for almost an hour. Everything my mother had told me about Aunt Claire suddenly made sense. Why she refused to talk about her. Why Grandma locked the room. Why my mother told me never to open the door. It wasn't because the house was haunted. It was because the truth was unbearable. I called my mother. This time, she answered immediately. "What did you do?" she asked. I said, "I opened the door." There was silence. Then I heard her start crying. Not loud at first. Then harder. "I told Grandma to destroy the tape," she whispered. "Why?" "Because I was scared. Kyle said he would hurt me if I told anyone. And after Claire died, I thought it was my fault. I thought if I had never dated him, she would still be alive." I felt my heart break. "You were a child," I said. "I was 16, she said. "I should have protected her." "No. The adults should have protected both of you." She told me that after Claire died, Kyle disappeared for a while. Then he moved to another city. There was never enough evidence to charge him with anything. My grandmother found the tape later but was terrified of what it could do to Mom. So she locked the room. She hid the evidence. And she stayed silent. For 20 years. That night, the knocking did not happen. For the first time since I moved in, the house was completely still. The next morning, I took the journal and tape to the police. At first, the detective who spoke to me was cautious. The case was nearly 20 years old. The original evidence was gone. The officers involved had retired. The house had changed hands within the family. But the tape mattered. The journal mattered. And there was one other thing. The old security camera system I had installed after moving in. The camera had recorded the porch every night. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the front porch was always empty. No person. No shadow. No movement. But the audio captured 3 knocks. The detective listened to it several times. Then he asked whether the house had old exterior pipes. I said yes. He inspected the front porch, the basement, and the old heating system. What he discovered changed the mystery again. The knocking was not coming from outside. It was coming from inside the walls. Every night at 3:17 a.m., the old heating pipes expanded and struck against a loose support beam near the front entryway. 3 times. Knock. 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 The knocking had been happening for years. Maybe decades. My grandmother had heard it too. And every time she heard it, she remembered the night Claire died. She believed it was Claire trying to speak. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. But the sound led me to the locked door. And the locked door led me to the truth. The police reopened Claire's case. They located Kyle 3 months later. He was living under a different last name in another state. He had a family, a job, a life that looked completely normal from the outside. But when investigators confronted him with the tape, the journal, and the old records, he stopped denying that he had been at the house. He claimed Claire had fallen accidentally. He claimed he panicked and ran. But the evidence showed he had been there. The prosecutor said they could not undo 20 years of silence. But they could finally give Claire the investigation she should have had. My mother came to the courthouse the day Kyle was charged. She wore one of Claire's old necklaces. She held my hand so tightly that my fingers hurt. When the judge read the charges, my mother closed her eyes. Later, outside the courtroom, she said something I will never forget. I spent 20 years thinking silence was protecting me. But it was only protecting him. That was the real lesson. Silence can feel safe. Especially when the truth is painful. Especially when you are afraid people will blame you. Especially when you are a child who thinks an adult's violence is somehow your fault. But silence does not make pain disappear. It only gives it a place to hide. After the case reopened, my mother and I went back to the house together. We cleaned Aunt Claire's room. Not because we wanted to erase her. Because we wanted to remember her properly. We took down the old calendar. We opened the curtains. We boxed up the books, journals, and school papers. My mother found a photo of herself and Claire at the beach. They were both laughing. For the first time, she smiled when she looked at it. Then she said she loved the ocean. I had never known that. There were so many things about Claire that had been buried with the secret. Her favorite songs. Her bad handwriting. Her love of strawberry ice cream. The fact that she wanted to study art. The fact that she had been brave enough to stand up to someone who scared her. The house stopped feeling haunted after that. Or maybe I stopped being afraid of it. The knocking still happened at 3:17 a.m. 3 knocks. Every night. But now, when I heard it, I didn't hide under my blankets or stare at the front door. I thought about Claire. I thought about a 17-year-old girl who tried to protect her sister. I thought about my grandmother, who carried guilt for years. I thought about my mother, who finally understood that she was not to blame. And I thought about the truth. The truth had been knocking for 20 years. Nobody answered. Until I did. Thank you for watching Calm Verdict Stories. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. Have you ever had a small detail in your life lead you to a truth nobody else wanted to face? Subscribe for more stories about hidden truth, family secrets, karma, justice, healing, boundaries, and life lessons. Until next time, stay strong, trust your instincts, and remember, sometimes the past knocks because it needs to be heard.